I was watching a Finlandish documentary about old-style farming and homesteading, and they would make homes designed to live and serve for a generation and then be rebuilt. They built these homes out of native rocks, native turf, native wood, and they were incredibly well insulated, tucked as they were into the hillside, draining well, zero preservatives or unnatural ingredients, all completely sustainable on these farmsteads that would last a generation. And then as a family, they would be rebuilt sustainably using very small structures and what was on the land. And it strikes me how much we have lost of our freedoms, of our traditions, of the technical know-how to live sustainably on our own land. How many of those freedoms and traditions have actually been legislated away piece by piece, such that an American Indian today would be illegal on our land, such that a family wishing to be self-sustainable and do approaches that worked for hundreds of years by the very fact that we're here. The fact that we survived as a species is the evidence that they worked. The fact that a few hundred years ago, many of our people didn't have a mortgage, didn't have $200,000 in student loans, etc., are evidence that they worked, not that they are a failure. And I want to begin by framing the challenges that our homeless, that some of our elderly, that some of our children, that some of our budding entrepreneurs face building a home in the city of San Rafael. First of all is isolation, because we shame our people for being homeless. We blame them. A loss of dignity for the same reason. You have isolation. How can you socialize? You have a loss of dignity. You have a stigma that prevents you from being employable, which becomes a vicious circle. Prevents you from developing strong social relationships. In our culture, you may get on well with someone. They may be dressed very nice. You may be meeting at a restaurant, etc., and then you learn that they're homeless, and there's a silence and a decision to pull away in our culture. So when you take away people's freedom to live, even in the most basic structures, you take away their ability to connect socially. You have the need for transportation and secure possessions. When you don't have a home, one of the most common aspects that the homeless tell me is other homeless and the police both steal their things while they're out living their lives during the day. They come back to their little tent, etc., and find that things have been stolen. So these correspond in many ways with Abraham Maslow's assessment of every human need, meaning every human being has had these needs throughout human history, and it's just a question of how each culture chooses to meet these needs. And that need is survival, which is warm, safe, protected shelter to sleep in, and good food and medical attention. So you have the need to survive. By definition, many of our homeless have that on a very shaky continuum. Our homeless are dying at a rate of 4 hours per day per 24 hours on the street. You have the security of that survival. We have removed this security for everyone for whom we do not allow the freedom to build a low-cost shelter. We have removed their ability to feel loved and belonging. You know, when I was out behind Home Depot and looking at one of the camps, I saw a notice from the police. It said, if you come to this place, you are trespassing, and if you don't clear out your things, we will confiscate them all and fine you. It's like, so you can't come onto the property to get your things, and if you don't get them, we'll remove them all. Do you feel like you belong? And then you think, well, okay, well, where do I go here? Well, what if I am lucky enough to have a job and it ends with after the bus commute, after the shelter closes? Well, you're out of luck. What if you can't get into a shelter? Well, you're out of luck about that. What if you have PTSD and you can't regulate the things that fit into the shelter? Well, you're out of luck about that too. What if you can't get to the shelter given the bus? And well, you're out of luck about that too. And so there's not an alternative that's made available for many of our homeless. And the final and the fourth human need in this hierarchy is self-esteem, liking oneself. Well, it's very difficult to like oneself when everyone resents you or hates you or projects villain on you. It's just difficult. And so when you take away safe legal shelter, we transmit the hatred of our culture onto its most vulnerable and low-ranking demographic. And it's very difficult when one is in pain, when one is unemployed and unemployable, when one is not wanted, and when one is hunted by one's own police force with one's own tax money. It's very difficult because our homeless, spending money in local stores, support the sales tax that pay for their own policing, but not for their care. So when you take away someone's freedom to live in this culture, you remove their survival, security, love and belonging, and their esteem. You also remove their health. And so what we're looking at is a cost-benefit analysis, because of course none of the people in Iceland or Finland chose to freeze to death rather than build these small structures. They all had a home because no government agency prevented them from building the homes they were capable of building on their own land. No one in Thailand has the absence of a home either, because the Thai government does not stop any Thai citizen from constructing a safe shelter on their own land, period. You don't have to get a permit to stick up a little tin hut. You just do it. So everyone does. So no one's homeless. And I want to address this paradigm here because this, for example, mirrors my own land as a San Rafael resident. So it's very narrow, about 60 feet wide, 65 feet wide, but it's more than 200 feet long. And like many homes in San Rafael and in Marin County, it has a slope. And all the houses are up in the front. And down here is nothing. It's just a liability in terms of needing to do some maintenance. You have the house, you have the garden, and then half the land, it's just sitting there. And so not only do our homeless not have a safe legal space to build, but I, as a landowner, do not have the freedom to provide housing, either in a commercial framework or in a nonprofit framework. I don't have the legal framework to do what the Native American Indians did for thousands of years before we arrived, what our first settlers did, what many people around the wilder areas of the United States still do. And you notice you don't hear on the headlines, "Man in northern Nebraska dies violently building his own house because it didn't meet code." You don't hear those headlines. And neither did you hear the headlines, "Teepee blows over in an earthquake 500 years ago." Nor did the Icelandic newspapers ring with the cries of sod house collapses in violent tornado. Because small, tiny houses built for oneself, using traditions that are often thousands of years old, are not built intentionally to fall over. A giant mansion could rupture in an earthquake, not a 120 square foot tiny house. So this is we're not faced with a threat of tiny houses tipping over, blowing over. We are, however, faced with daily news of millions of our citizens being raped, being treated poorly by the police, catching diseases, transmitting diseases, not being employable, breaking the law that is made for this, sleeping out of their cars. We are hit with that news constantly because we have designed our culture to create the protection of codes over people. Meaning, if the supposition of any city is that we care about our people, that's why we've put these policies in place, and the care is about the people, then it's so easy to fix the problem because I can call up and say, I'm just talking to a homeless person right here. He's sick. He doesn't have a safe place to sleep. He doesn't have a safe place and a healthy place to use the bathroom. Will you help? And a community and a government that is about people will rush over and provide those services. It's easy. Here's a porta potty. Here's a heater. Here's an extension cord to the nearest power source. You've anything else you need. It's easy to take care of our people. But there is not a single person I can call to help a single human being who's homeless. I can call for my dog. If my dog is running around or looks distressed, I've got a place to call. If there's a little bit of wetland being violated, I've got a place to call. But if a local resident driven to homelessness by the absence of low-cost housing, if they call or I call, there is no rapid response, and there's no guarantee of anything approaching the intelligence of our ancestors, of what we might have just done on our own a few hundred years ago without any public interference. So let's say we've got a slope like this, and we want to work with, let's say, 110 to 120 20 square foot units. That's a good one because we already have a fair amount of legislation regarding temporary structures. We just have this very bizarre add-on that says, well, if you do build a temporary structure and it's nice enough to live in, you can't do it. Why? Well, you just can't. Because we don't want there to be any low-cost housing. Here's an opportunity for a low-cost house, and we don't want that. Why? It's very puzzling. So here's what I might be able to do on this piece if it were not for the city of San Rafael's local housing ordinances and a protocol of making homelessness illegal in a variety of ways. The first thing is since you've got these little slope structures, and the ground usually isn't too steep, is you could build little broken concrete retaining walls so that the home can be level and tucked into the hillside rather than perched up on top. You can do the perched on approach as well. This is just a little safer, a little bit more insulated in terms of wind, and it's also a little bit more respectful for neighbors, because when you're dealing with one-story structures, you can literally do it so that the entire roof is, for example, a grass roof. It's beautiful to look at from above. It's more insulated. It's not hard to do. And so you can build a little traditional cottage like this. You can also build a shed roof like this. You can also build an opposite shed roof that ties in with the slope. And you can have it be planted or not. Either way. When you're using all natural materials, it tends to look nice regardless. It's a nice integration. But basically, when you've got a little bit of a slope, you cut in about 3 feet. You put a little bit of drain rock, and there's endless amounts of broken and recyclable concrete that makes excellent retaining walls. It's actually the safest dry stack retaining wall material that there is. And so you can not only contribute to recycling, get free material, but this is something that anyone can learn how to do in one day. I train people all the time in it. So you take your slope, you dig out your section of dirt with a shovel, and you put in these broken concrete pieces. And now you've got the place to build your single bedroom sleeping area. And as soon as you've built this, and I kind of like this design here where the bed is raised, you've got a storage area in the back with cupboards or shelves, whatever's that you want. Got a bed raised and a door under, and then you've got some places for storage and clothes under the bed. And as soon as this has a roof, it's warm, it's dry, and it's safe, even without insulation, because you're in such a small area that you're going to warm it up. And it's already a step above what 90% of our homeless have right now. And there's nothing stopping endless amounts of embellishment and insulation and all that. It's also using less energy. Even without any insulation, a small structure like this, even if you plugged in a space heater and ran an extension cord, or lit a little propane torch heater even without that, it's going to be warmer and use less energy with no insulation than the giant houses that we insist are triple insulated, but we also insist are big. So you dig out these little pockets, and you can do just one. And the protocol is you've now got a safe place to sleep. You walk down through the garden path. You either park your bicycle or you use Uber or Lyft. So you've now got a safe place to sleep. You add a mailbox to the existing box up at the street. You've now got an address, or you can have a separate P.O. box. That's neither, it's so many options in that area. You've now got a safe place to sleep. And you have a couple of different options. Some places already have like an outdoor pool house or outhouse that's part of an existing structure. In some cases, you can put and replace a temporary porta potty. It's just replaced every month. And you've got instant toiletry. We all can lug a gallon of water or go up to the hose and get a gallon of water for drinking. So it's as simple as that, as a one unit, one person experience, and now it's off the street. Meaning one homeless person now has a safe, legal place to sleep without a stigma, with police protection from which they can get a job. It's that simple. They can get mail, they can do online stuff through their phone. Many of our homeless have some of the best phones because it's their lifelink. One homeless person says, we always have the best phones because we don't have to pay rent, and the phone is important. Not sure how representative that is, but he certainly had a good phone. And so this is option number one. But what about, since they're such small structures, and since one of the issues is isolation, another is health and safety. And these go up when you have 3 or 4 people. So now you've got people near that can help. And one of the most interesting things that I've observed whenever I've seen more than 4 homeless people working together is they are their best support people. I don't see them calling the city. I don't see them calling this. I see them loaning money this, paying back this, exchanging this, giving here's the butter back that I got you. I mean, it's an interesting swap meet dynamic. How are you doing with this? I see the homeless taking care of the homeless. And it makes sense because they understand each other and the issues. And so if you have 3 or 4 or even 5 of these little huts grouped together, let's say we've got 75 by 60 and kind of an area of land here. Could be wooded or not wooded, it doesn't matter. These little structures are so small they can tuck in either between trees or, there's so many different options. It can be sunny, they can be shady, doesn't matter. There's pros and cons to both. So if I then tuck another little structure and another little structure and another little structure here, and then stick a dining room table and some chairs, possibly a little umbrella, a little gazebo umbrella, buy it online for $100. You've now got a little sitting area, a little social area. And our homeless are incredibly innovative, just like all of our ancestors in these kinds of situations. This is way better than our original pioneers had it, going out in wagons, driving west, dealing with unknown things, not having supermarkets nearby. So this is a reality that is literally 1,000% safer than we asked our own settlers to endure. It's simply a choice. You could have one of these, 10 of these, 5 of these, as many as people chose to enact. Now, over here, one of the things that you certainly would prefer, other than just a porta potty, is you prefer a shower. You prefer to be able to go to the toilet in a healthy way and have some fresh water to brush your teeth and get some drinking water. That'd be ideal. Now, what's interesting in other countries, like when I go to Thailand and there's this lovely restaurant up on a cliff, they just have a water tank with 1,000 gallons, and a truck drives by and runs a hose, and they pay a water refill fee. They don't actually have to have water, and most places don't, particularly out on a beach hotel, a beach restaurant. They just pay a truck. In this case, you can also run a hose down to a water tank, or you can just run a hose. But you want some water, and you can either use bottled water, or you can connect to a potable source. And one of the nice things when you reduce the cost and effort and the loan and mortgage and all that way down, you don't need a mortgage to build a little 112 square foot thing. You own your house free and clear. One of the nice things is you actually have more money to invest in the local economy. In other words, the building I'm sitting in right now costs me $4,000 a month to live in. Whether I'm single or have a family, that's the base price, $4,000 a month. And the permits and stuff are such a hassle that I haven't built yet. I've built in another state twice, but the hassle and permits are so outrageous in San Rafael. And it's not that different in the surrounding areas compared to, for example, Whidbey Island, where I built. It's a great place where many Californians retire, by the way, because housing is so much lower and the ambiance is just as nice, if not nicer. So you have houses that are 3 times cheaper, more land, friendlier, more open space near the beach and all that. Whidbey Island is a place where many Californians retire. So I built up there twice, and it was easy and cheap. So that obviously, as a 23-year-old, I built my first house. And so in this area, what you want are 2 sinks if it's a group of 4 or 5 people, a toilet, and a shower. Now, in Thailand and in Europe and many places, we don't heat up a huge hot water tank. What we do is we have either a propane-fired or an electrical portable heater that costs around $100. Literally $100, and you're set to go. You have a hose coming into it. You turn the switch. The propane heater or electric thing turns on. Hot water comes out of the shower. Zero waste. Zero waste. It's just going through 3 feet of pipe. You only use it when you need it, and then it's off. When you use biodegradable soaps, the natural thing is to just let it run through, the downhill leaves, garden, and vegetation. I mean, you can add a drain. But if you're using biodegradable soaps, and particularly if you've got some landscape plants in here, why wouldn't you let your natural shower water, which poses zero health risk, why wouldn't you actually use that water to irrigate your land as opposed to send it off to a municipality that's going to use that as the basis to bring tax prices to some of the highest property taxes in the country? And one of the bases, we've got to handle all your sewer. No, you don't. Little switch to biodegradable soaps, little intelligence, and you separate the shower water, and now that doesn't have to go to the sewer, which means you don't need a sewer hookup fee that is more than the cost of the whole little structure. Which means you can't say, oh, it'll overrun the system. Because, whether you run it into a little narrow trench drain and let it seep out slowly through there, or, just a spreader bar, a 5-minute shower that's low drip like this is just about the right amount to water the downhill plants. I'm a landscape designer. Great, you save money on water, you save money on sewer, you waste less money on all the complications of our plumbing. Done. So this would be the little shower unit. And heaven forbid you couldn't afford $100 for a little propane shower unit like much of the world uses. Well, you have a cold shower. So you have a shower unit. Now the toilet is important. And one of the best things would be to separate the urine and mix that with shower water, because that makes excellent irrigation. If you run that through kind of drain field on a slope, your downhill plants will be ideally and very cautiously and safely watered with a mixture of urine, which has nitrogen, and biodegradable shower water, and just irrigating the landscape, saving money and saving municipal resources. This is, again, what people have done for thousands of years. The Native Americans didn't have sewer systems. And the places, whether you go to Alaska or any other places, you're not finding this is an issue. So one of the big problems we have is one of perspective. We exaggerate. Oh, it's this huge issue that, like, we've only had this style of toilets for the last 100 years and still don't have them in many places in the world. But we say it's kind of like this huge city emergency if someone doesn't use this kind of toilet. But it's not an emergency when they're dying under a bridge. And it's like, well, where's the perspective around that? And in the land of the brave and the free, can we allow our people to make their own choices at all? Or these have to be legislated? So, we have, if you have a composting toilet, Bill Gates is doing the best research on this. $200 million recently invested in composting toilets that generate pelletized, dry, scent-free, bacteria-free fertilizer. It is a fertilizer production machine that is a work of art. Now, the only problem is they're not legal in the city of San Rafael. State of the art. Bill Gates has invested $200 million, but that's not good enough for the city of San Rafael. And again, you have to go back to, is it codes or is it human lives? Codes or human lives? The codes say we've got to keep out this new technology. Human decency says we have to save human lives. but bureaucrats have statistically sided with codes over human lives. At least I've never encountered the city official who's fretting about this or that person dying out under a bridge. But you should see the fit they have about 2 inches of step on some concrete pour, or this or that or the other. I mean, these violations of sacred city codes are very big deals. And it'd be funny if it wasn't killing people with our tax money. So we have a variety of options. For example, on my property, the sewer runs out because this is a big, long grade down the hill. On my property, the sewer hookup is down here. And so the most intelligent thing would be to run a single toilet and a 4-inch PVC pipe, can be done in a weekend, from the toilet, underground, connect into the sewer line, which then runs up the hill to connect with the house. Done. Issue solved. And we just have, about 10 new flushes a day that wouldn't exist otherwise. And with the separation of shower, and you have the option of urine. You could have the, like, for a male urinal. The male urinal could go into the landscape irrigation, but it's more natural if you do have the luxury, and it is a luxury, of flowing water sewer. Then you can just connect that with the toilet and then have the urinal go in as a separate option. So you've now got teeth, brushing, shower, toilet. You've got 4 people who now have a home. Now, you want to assess the intelligence of a project like this in terms of, first of all, cost. Something like this is something that I can do personally, easily, as one resident, to create 4 homes for people currently on the street. Now, I can do it and cash flow. Cash flow, if you're in development, I've done land development and stuff. Cash flow just means that after all your expenses, you make a net positive, you have net cash in the bank on a monthly basis if this is coming in. So for $300 to $400 a month, if we imagine for a moment that we were not being pinned in by the city of San Rafael, but were, for example, in an Alaskan wilderness, where this same piece of land was there, but just no city official is going to come by and say, no, put these people back under a bridge, and go through their various regulations. This could be done for $300 to $400 a month. And then you have to ask yourself, of the 1,000 people or so wandering around without a safe legal place to sleep, without an address, etc., being shamed and this and that, would any of them pay $300 to $400 a month? One of the reasons it's important to hit that target is that's precisely what they're telling me they can pay, but they can't find. And we come back to the issue of choice, because if they would move into this, and if I would build it for them, or if I would give them the space to build it themselves, and it could make money with $300 to $400 a month, and that's what they have, and they're currently costing the city $40,000 to $60,000 of our money in ER visits, in park renovations, in policing, in managing health crisis, because naturally when you're a disease, you don't say, oh, these are homeless people that the rest of the population doesn't care about, so we're not going to care about them either. No, disease isn't bigoted. Disease says these are dirty, stressed, low immune individuals. Let's strike there, and then they'll spread the disease to the rest of the species who doesn't have the intelligence to take care of their own. That's what a disease thinks if it might be able to articulate. And so, of course, then when, for example, hepatitis, I think it's A in Southern California, starts spreading amongst the homeless, it then spreads to other people. And then you have to spend millions of dollars in public money to fight hepatitis. But of course, we can't allow people the freedom that they had even 200 years ago on their own land to avoid the problem altogether. And so that's this crisis of governance. So then you have things like parking. Obviously, you can't just create four cars. But again, when you take housing from a typical $2,500 a month rental, or even a $1,000 a month rental, and you reduce it to $300 or $400, well, many of our homeless have bicycles, first of all. You don't need any parking for a bicycle. They just walk them down the garden path. Or might have an electric bicycle. Again, walk it down the garden path. But Uber and Lyft have now brought things to a point where you might be able to be car-free, pay $300 to $400 a month for a nice tiny home, and even with all being driven around in luxury with a chauffeur, be paying less per month than a traditional San Rafael rental, and no extra parking, plus more money going into the economy for taxi drivers who are not happy, and Lyft drivers and stuff like that. So this is this addresses parking and transportation. Now, what about cooking? Well, again, these are not cooking spaces. They're sleeping spaces. If you're only paying $300 to $400 a month, you can attend local restaurants and bring a little bit of vitality. Something many of our cities die out on the inside because they don't have a base to support them. It's not fun being a business owner, and restaurants go out of business all the time. So let them support the restaurant industry. But there's also, when you have a little table like this, you have a barbecue grill, something our ancestors have done for thousands of years. Very easy to do. You have a little fire pit, a barbecue grill, and you give people the choice. Or they have a little cooking unit, a little propane. It's okay. You set up a protocol of what makes that safe as part of the design. Or if it's not safe, you just say, no cooking on this site. This is a non-cooking site. This is a sleeping site. It's the same with people living in their cars. They don't have kitchens inside their cars. No, they go to a restaurant, get a picnic, get some takeout, etc. So, and again, this is not a prescription. This is not saying all 1,000 people have to move into this. It's just saying that it's a self-evident fact that if I were allowed to build this without being interfered with by the city, then I would build it. And if I did build it, renting these for $300 to $400 a month, which the goal would be to break even, would be a cinch. And teaching some of them skills, like saying, would you like to help out and reduce cost and stuff like that, builds esteem, builds dignity, builds health and muscle, lets me get to know them. It's a good system. So, tables are being thrown out in our dumps every single day. I mean, furniture, everywhere I drive around, free this, but our homeless don't know where they are and don't have cars to go get them. But there's a lot of free furniture that's being trucked off to a landfill because nobody wants it in San Rafael. So we have basic picnicking, this, that, and the other. And what about electricity? Well, I think one of the best things, of course, would be to have a battery and a couple of solar panels and just very low usage. And that just takes care of the whole hookup. But it's also something that, homeowners around the world do constantly, unofficially or officially, is they just go to their utility box, add a submeter, trench an 18-inch deep trench with direct burial wire, and run a single outlet to each of these buildings. And and then divide up the electrical cost from the submeter or estimate it. And if you just have it trip, if it tries to draw more than the certain amount of amperage or just doesn't, deliver it, that regulates the amount. It's not an unlimited supply when you have a single wire coming down through here. And so that means maybe you can't have electric space heaters or refrigerators. You can, and that's not the purpose of these. These are to provide safe, legal, low-cost housing for the people that want them, for the people who do not have the freedom to choose them today. And so let's look at a couple of different issues with this. So one of the most important things, and it is definitely dealt with by having 3 or 4 people together, is just losing track with what's going on. And one of the important roles that we have with people, 42% of our homeless have PTSD, for example. And so this is very easy to do on let's make it 3 times better than their current setup under a bridge or whatever. Let's make it safe, let's make it legal, let's make it sanitary, let's make it healthy, let's make these people employable from a point they can now say, this is my address, they can take a shower, they can show up, they've got their bicycle, they've got bus, options, Uber, Lyft. So that's taking care of the technical side. But of course, we are mental, emotional, and physical human beings. 2 of those are psychological, by the way. Mental and emotional. And some of our homeless are addicts. Some of them have been abused into PTSD. Some of them have depression. Some of them have mental emotional illness, etc. And you cannot treat people. You have to treat a person. And one of the interesting things about Jane McGonigal's TED Talk, Gaming to Make a Better World, is she has taken these games and tested them on things like depression. If you turn depression into a game and you try and get points where every day you do this, you get a reward and you play online, etc., it works. Gamification works. It's why we spend so much time as a culture playing video games. And it's often more fun than real life, because in real life you work your ass off and then your local official tells you you're 2 inches off and it's not their concern. Well, in a game, you work your ass off, you claim points, you win an award, buzzing goes off, and it's wonderful. And so one of the things that I think is an important part of this program is a daily check-in. Are you safe? Are you healthy? Were you the victim of a crime? What did you do in the last 24 hours that took you a step towards the future you want to live in? Where are you having trouble? Do you need anything? Send. It's not that complicated. And it is a concern if people are so debilitated they can't take 5 minutes a day to do that. That is a concern, and so that becomes the basis for a prompt or to check in with the other people in the location. Is that person safe? Are they there? Why aren't they responding to their daily check-in kind of thing? Now, this structure as a game where you get points for this and that and the other, and you're trying to be in the top, X% of people growing and, moving towards perhaps your goal is more traditional housing. Well, you're going to have to get a job, which means you're going to have to dress, which means you're going to have to resume. And those are all game points. You do this, you get game points. And it's free, particularly if it's run by volunteers. And I tend to think that it's a healthy engagement, meaning I would enjoy the opportunity to be someone's mentor in this program, where every day they'd send me a list and any questions, and I'd respond with anything I could have, and go talk to them a few times a week to a few times a month, or respond, good for you for doing this. I think this does something for the larger community because we actually have a group of retired, highly successful people who are lonely and feel purposeless. That's another waste product of our culture. We've created this figmentation idea that people want to retire and do nothing and drink, when this is incredibly boring and miserable after a few months of it. And so, but we don't have we haven't said we really need the most intelligent, experienced, older people of our culture for this important task. We haven't gotten around to thinking about that either. And we do need them. Cultures have always needed to rely on their elders. And so the opportunity to be a mentor is a very important part of giving back. It's actually a human need. If you look at Maslow's area of human needs, you actually climb to the next level, which is self-development. You go to the next level and it's giving back and being recognized in the community for your skills. Every human has a need for that. And you climb the last level and it's about loving and caring for something bigger than yourself, be that a church, be that a culture, a country. We have a human need in our culture that is not being met for our elderly, to give back to those who are younger and those who are in need of their talent, of their expertise, of their time, so that it creates purpose, meaning, and a cycle of energy that you give back. It's like the same process. We extract from the earth, and then we don't put the compost back, and the earth gets depleted. We extract from the culture, and we don't provide a way for our elderly to give back. So this is a really big issue. Now, what an app does is it makes this easy. I don't have to drive over in the rain and walk down the garden and check in daily, or the whole thing falls apart. No, every 24 hours, my phone says, your sponsor hasn't checked in today. So then check with their friends. And they get the message as well. Your neighbor hasn't checked in today. And if they respond and say everything's fine, they're sleeping or whatever, they have a hangover and they're depressed, well then, do they need something, etc. And so there's a dynamic response. And you also see what is the pattern, because an app can track things daily. This person, 6 months ago, they did 50% of what they said they would do. 6 months later, they're doing 80% of what they said they're going to do. That's called progress. 6 months ago, they got out of bed at an average of noon. Now they're getting out of bed at an average of 8 a.m. That's important, particularly if they want to get a job. That's called progress. 6 months ago, they had an ulcer they hadn't taken care of. They didn't have flu shots. Now they do. That's called progress. You measure this stuff. This is the desired outcome. Here's where they are when they started. This is the daily contact, and here's the result. The results speak for themselves, and they give meaning and break isolation cycles for both sides. Our seniors sitting around watching TV with no sense of meaning, some of them committing suicide, and the most vulnerable people in our population who are just struggling. And you have deep friendships that can form around this. I met a young woman whose mother threw her out because she dated in college, so she became homeless. Her mother just threw her out within 24 hours because she dated someone when she was in college. What was she to do? She either had to drop out of college or she had to go to college from being homeless. She chose the latter. And while the police were hunting her into dark places by making it illegal to sleep in her car, she was gang raped because she was out of the streetlight view. See, that's the trouble when your police become your enemy, and then you're a young woman. She was gang raped. Hiding from our police. Does that sound like a civilized culture? Or does this sound like the Hunger Games? What kind of town do we want to be? So, an app that tracks this kind of stuff makes a big difference. You can gauge measurable results and trends over time, and the whole dialogue can be overseen by a nonprofit, that's job is to check in with about 20 or so mentors and mentorees and just see, does anyone have any trouble? Are there encounters you need help, etc.? And then that should be more of a professional role. But anyone can say, how are you doing? I want to help. And when those communications are being tracked on an app, it can be very clear if there's any kind of an unhealthy dynamic going on that needs to have support, or if someone should be paired with a different mentor. But again, we're just getting out of the way of our people. People want to grow. People want to love. People want to be meeting their needs to survive. They want to survive. They want to feel more secure. They want to feel like they belong. These are human needs. My dog has that. He comes and cuddles with me. He wants love and belonging. He barks when he wants food. This is not some new fad. Mammals for millions of years have had these same basic needs. And the ironic thing is I'm allowed to help my dog survive more than I'm allowed to help the residents in my town survive. If I want to build a little dog house for Philip, no one's going to bother me. If I want to build a little house for a human being, I'll be given a stack of red tape this thick. And I say, okay, well, do you have a better plan? And it's like, no, we don't want to hear about it, and that's not our job. Our job is to make it hard for you to help people. It's fine if you help your dog. It's the same with immigration, I might add. My wife immigrated, and it cost me $200,000 in time off work and this and that to fly over and go through the absurd protocol called U.S. immigration. It took 2 years, $200,000 to get my wife to actually come and live with me in my own house. $300 to get a Thai dog to come over here. Dogs are people. Protocols or human lives. Codes are human beings. So, this thing can be done in dozens of different ways. These little huts are safer in earthquakes, in many cases, than giant houses built to code. The views, because the neighbors are usually over here, like my two neighbors are up here as well. So the neighbor's looking down. I could build a single structure to code, and it would rent out for around $1,800 a month, and it would cash flow. I could build a single structure for one person to code down here. And the neighbors would have a much bigger monolithic structure. I could even build it 2 stories high, no problem. But these little huts tucked into the ground that the neighbors wouldn't even notice, that would house 4 homeless people in a low-cost housing protocol. This is the thing that the city is targeting and blocking, while at the same time not providing a safe legal alternative for our people to sleep. Thanks for watching, and if you'd like to support this in any way, with money, with time, with a call to the city of San Rafael and other cities to watch this video and respond, I'd be grateful for your help. Our people need it.